So many years ago, David Colton came to the conclusion that there was a specific role he always would have to play, and it's not a nice one. And for a long time, it seemed as if he had just let that go. But now he's back on it and he's leaning into it heavy. So let's talk about all of it. But first, if you're enjoying these videos, be sure to drop a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and don't forget to hit that bell to get all notifications. Alright, so as this continues with the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, and Namor making their way to Symkaria to stop Thunderbolt Ross, even though the Secretary General told them not to, this makes for a scenario where there's no room for error on their part. And now with Thunderbolt Ross, what he says here perfectly describes what's been building up with his character the past couple years, with him saying America is more than a country, it's an idea powered by freedom, by democracy. Laws and statutes have been passed in my country about promoting democracy on the global stage. Meaningless words written by men who are afraid to get their hands dirty. But I'm not, because through and through, this is Thunderbolt Ross taking matters into his own hands. And where he is now is something we've seen build up over the course of time. And we talked about this some recently, because when Thunderbolt Ross regained his ability to Hulk out back in the 2018 Captain America series, from there he went into this mode where it was like, now that he's back, he's putting his pride to the side. And because his heart's with the US, he was willing to start from the bottom and serve his country however it would let him, which ironically, and maybe not so ironically, led to him being used in a similar way to how he used David Colton, where the US would send Ross on secret missions in order to tie up loose ends and still maintain plausible deniability. And Ross didn't feel like any less of a patriot doing any of this, because to him this was still like he was just getting his hands dirty for his country. But then when Doom took Ross as his prisoner, around the time of Blood Hunt, if not just before, because this was before Doom became Sorcerer Supreme, but with Ross being held as Doom's prisoner throughout Blood Hunt and all the way through One World Under Doom as a way to use Ross's strategic mind, when he finally got out of there and Thunderbolt Ross learned how the United States and the world had just bent the knee to Doom, this nearly brought him to the extreme point where he's at now, because even after this, Ross was still trying to do things the right way. But when the Secretary of State constantly kept Ross on a short leash and he wouldn't let Ross handle things the way he believed they needed to be handled, that's when Thunderbolt Ross was like, I'm not waiting for anyone's permission anymore, which led to him making his own team of Hulks. And in the 2025 Captain America series, when he learned how far left things had went with Steve Rogers and the new S.H.I.E.L.D. team, where also the young clone of Doom was discovered, along with a backpack holding a clairvoyant device that was designed to help that young clone of Doom rise to power. The combination of Ross getting his hands on that device, met with the conviction of him needing to do things his way. When these two things came together, all he saw was a path towards victory. But right now, Symkaria, when one of his Hulks are hit by a ton of rockets, this dude is in excruciating pain. But Ross just basically tells him that's alright, it's all part of the plan. Which shows us that not only are his Hulks kind of low tier on the Hulk totem, but also, as it would seem, Ross sees these guys as expendable in the larger picture of what he's trying to do. Because even when the heroes initially arrive, Thunderbolt Ross welcomes the fight. But also right now, as this is getting started, we're shown a conversation between Secretary General Riani and the Russian minister, where he's already let her know that he's stepping away from the UN's solution to these quote-unquote American Hulks, as he would call them. And all he really tells her is that Russia's going to handle this their own way, which I imagine to the Secretary General and perhaps some others, this looks like Minister Milyukov is making a prideful decision. But when he arrives in Russia and we see that he's met by the Winter Guard, when he exchanges words with Crimson Dynamo, who basically tells the minister that he's going to put his mind at ease if all things go according to plan. This lets us know that the Russian ministers put some thought into this, so there's a good chance that this is not just about protecting Russia, but perhaps also looking for an opportunity. But back over in Symkaria, where now Sam Wilson's trying to get the soldiers to fall back so they don't get hurt in the superhuman squabble, while Bucky Barnes, he falling forward, all in Ross's face. But now that they've got the fight going, when David Colton swoops in with an uppercut to one of Ross's Hulks, both Thunderbolt Ross and Ben Grimm stopped what they're doing, like, whoa. And Ross is looking at Colton now like, wait a minute, when did this guy become a Viltrumite? Because not only is Colton more powerful than when Ross had last seen him, but Doom's machine did not predict Colton getting involved, let alone at this level. So when he beams in going straight for Ross, Sam tells Tony and Carol to go after them. And it's not a thing where it's like either Tony or Carol are going to be able to either tame or contain Colton, but out of everyone that's here, there are only a handful of heroes who are able to sort of keep up with him in his fight with Thunderbolt Ross. And I wouldn't even necessarily call this a fight, because even for Ross, after a couple of hits, he already knows he's outmatched. And at one point he says here, David Colton, my Captain America, I don't know what's happened. He's got power now. Too much of it. Doom's machine didn't see this. And he's like, man, I need to reassess. So when Colton beams in for the next attack, Ross uses that momentum against him, and he buys himself enough time to take the fight to a different location, because Colton brought Ross out into this open field, where clearly David Colton had the advantage, because with his speed, strength, and flight ability, he can quickly chase down Ross in any direction. And it also seems like this was David's attempt to take the fight away from civilians as well, which is the exact opposite of what Thunderbolt Ross is thinking, because he quickly heads to the next nearest town, thinking like, yeah, this is the hero's weakness. They'll pull their punches, in fear of innocent bystanders being harmed. But of course, this is where Thunderbolt Ross finds out that David Colton is a little different than the other heroes, because he's not letting up at all. And now for a moment here, when we go back to the others, I find it funny how, we often have the conversation about how as a character, Wolverine was initially designed to come in and fight the Hulk. And to me, when I think of that in this moment here, where Logan is just going in on one of Ross's Hulks, who as we've seen don't heal like other Hulks. And it's like thinking about that and seeing Logan tell this guy, take the L, kid. This ain't going your way. And it's like, man, Logan's trying to tell him, when it comes to fighting Hulks, I do this, and listen to me. You are not built for this. And it's made even clearer when T'Challa comes in and hits him with a concussive electrical temple blast, which takes him down, and it has Sue like, dang, T'Challa, what'd you do? And that's where T'Challa points out here, something's wrong with this Hulk. He's been injured by rocket fire, and he's not healing. Which again, this had to be something that Ross knew about for quite some time. And now as Tony and Carol are following the path of destruction left by Colton and Ross, they're out here shuffling to save who they can. And they're going back and forth quick, because even now when Tony reads that there's 120 people in this building, Carol's like, I'll brace it while you find us a spot to land it. And Tony tells her he'll have to park to the west clear in 20 seconds. But Carol's not confident that they even have that much time, because she can feel the building crumbling. So yeah, the destruction that's been caused from the fight, it's got Tony and Carol scrambling to save as many people as they can. Never mind the fact that Colton and Ross are still fighting here. And at one point where Tony's like, David, get Ross out of the city now. To me, it's like I can almost hear Tony's frustration and fear for the safety of the people when he says this. And even now, Ross is telling Colton how what he's doing as far as spreading democracy is the same thing Colton used to rant about when he became a super soldier. So it's like Ross is telling him we both want the same thing, just before Colton moves the fight once again, further out away from the city. And once they're out here, Colton just starts hammering Ross. And one thing you'll notice here is that Colton hasn't said a word to Ross. And with how he's just going off here, I believe this is Colton going back to that place where we saw him at the end of our Secret Wars. And I don't mean to the extent where he's about to go on another kill streak. And I mean, he might, like I wouldn't put it past him. But I don't think he's as far gone as he was in Latveria just over a decade ago, when he was on a mission to kill every Latverian soldier that Doom had. And he was making quite the progress. But instead, I would say it seems like Colton's going back to the realization he came to at the time, when he convinced himself that this brutal enforcer is who he had to be. And this was delivered to us at the time in a way that showed the contrast between David Colton and Steve Rogers, which by the way is before Colton got his Superman upgrade. So for now, I'm just talking about what we saw during his time as a standard super soldier with similar abilities to Steve Rogers. Because when Colton was introduced, there was this compare and contrast between Major Colton and Captain Rogers, where with Steve, who was fresh out of the ice, believed he had to be a light, that he had to continue being a symbol for good, even in this new modern world where it seems like either side's just as bad as the other. While for Colton, as much as he had tried in the past to be good, he kept finding himself in situations where he believes he had no other choice but to be a monster, like in Afghanistan when one of his men took out a kid who the soldier believed marked their squad to be bombed, and that soldier took it upon themselves to do this, to get payback because that explosion killed one of their men. And in response to this tragic moment, Colton gave that man a taste of his shield. And this was also that first incident that led to the US government putting Colton on missions that were quote-unquote under the cover of night or in the deepest jungles, which in a lot of ways is similar to what we saw with Ross. And in Latveria, when a member of his team was instructed to kill all the witnesses, even the little ones, Colton had to do what he had to do to save that kid. And it wasn't pretty. But it was moments like these that made David Colton believe that the Boy Scout route isn't always an option. And eventually he's always going to be put in the position where he needs to beat somebody inside out or outside in until the inside is out. And to me, it's like he's going back to that acceptance. But while he's here ground pounding Thunderbolt Ross, Colton hears someone approaching, and that someone is Bucky Barnes. And now, though no words are exchanged here, you can tell Bucky's giving him this look like, okay, man, that's enough. And there may even be a bit of that, one super soldier to another. Hey, man, I get it kind of vibe going on here. but also in our Secret Wars when we got the origin of David Colton, and I have the link to that full video down in the description. But in that story, we were told that both Steve Rogers and David Colton had their anchors, where for Steve it was Bucky and for David it was his mother. And during the time the story took place, where again Steve was fresh out of the ice, Steve didn't have Bucky. So that both of these guys had to face the challenge of trying to stay good without that anchor. But as we know, as time went on, Steve got his anchor back, and David never did. So there's nothing to really keep Colton from going off on the deep end. And maybe the closest thing is Steve Rogers, but he's in hell right now. So that intervention ain't coming no time soon. So now for Colton, who's a man who's way too familiar with being in this position, he sees no problem with ending Thunderbolt Ross right here and right now. But just before he can punch Ross's soul into another dimension, Tony swoops in and he tells Colton, no, you don't get to decide that. He's down, he'll face trial. And Tony goes on to tell him like, dude, you were reckless back there and people are dead because of you. Only for Colton to shut down Tony's speech and his suit, just before saying, you all talk too much. People died. It's war. It's unfortunate, and I'll carry those deaths with me, the same as I did before. But you know what? More people will keep dying because you let Ross live. You're weak. God gave you incredible abilities, and yet you're all so damn weak. People with powers and big brains playing at helping people. You should be ashamed. And right after that, Colton takes off. And wherever he's going, it can't be great, just based on where his head's at. But back over with Sam and the others, the Hulks are down. And in the full scope, the heroes really made this whole situation go from bad to worse, because the Avengers got involved when they were told not to. Countless lives were lost, and they managed to rekindle the dark side of David Colton. So yeah, remember when I said these guys had no room for error? Well, guess what? There's more. Because with Tony's armor being on the fritz after his clash with Colton, Bucky goes to catch up with Tony to let him know that in addition to Colton being MIA, so is Thunderbolt Ross. Which right there, that's just an insult to injury. Because taking in Ross is the least they could have done. Because that way their main focus would have only been Colton. But nope, they got problems on every side. L's everywhere. But also we find out here that the Winter Guard, they zipped in and took Ross in and out without being noticed, thanks to Darkstar. And right now as they're taking Ross to the Russian minister, they have no clue what his plans are with Thunderbolt Ross, because that's above their pay grade and they were just told to bring him in alive. But when Crimson Dynamo says here, I shudder to think what Mother Russia needs from this wild bomb. I can't imagine that it's going to be anything good. And again, this really feels like the Russian minister is going for a power move. And now back over with the Avengers, it's a mess. But now that they have everyone accounted for better or worse, the hospitals are packed. So Sue and Vision, they're taking the overflow to neighboring cities, while T'Challa has medical aid coming in from Wakanda. And now with Carol looking for Tony, she asks Reed and T'Challa if they've seen him. Reed tells her that Tony went to look for clues at Ross's base, where he might have escaped to. And Carol's like, how did he even do that? Because no scanner showed him heading anywhere. And Reed's just like, it's unusual. So yeah, this whole thing is a mess. And Carol tells Reed here, dozens dead, the UN up in arms. And not only are we missing a Hulk, we also have an AWOL ex-soldier with the powers of a Sentry. So yeah, everyone who was going for Sentry, as far as what powers David Colton has, you guys got it. So sound off in the comments and let me know if you were going for Sentry or if you was hoping he had the powers of someone else. But now when Carol asks Reed, what are we going to do? He tells her we take stock, analyze the situation, and then we do what we always do. We try our best. And now when Tony arrives at the camp, one of Ross's men is like, hey, we had them, you know? And Tony's just like, wait, what are you talking about? And he tells Tony, the Hulks, we were winning. But then you and your damn posse had to ride into town looking for glory. And now people are dead. And you're walking around a free man, a free citizen who's never served a day in his life. What do you have to say for yourself? And all Tony can tell him here is whatever you're feeling towards me and my friends, I assure you, we're feeling it 10 times worse. And now when Tony goes in, he asks Friday to do a scan and see if there's anything of note here. Friday tells him there's 3 laptops that they can further analyze, a portable gamma radiation box, which sounds like a Red Hulk battery pack, but Friday goes on saying, and an unknown object, giving off what appears to be multiversal energy. So Tony's like, if you had to guess, what does it do? And Friday tells him, based on what I can tell, it may be a prognostication machine used for seeing the future. So Tony's like, okay, why not give it a spin and see what Ross saw? When Tony takes a look, he sees this absurdly huge mushroom cloud. And I'm talking about reaching well into space huge. And now, though we don't really know what this explosion means, I'm willing to bet that it's probably the Avengers' fault. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here, who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.